Stories tell of a creature seen in Point Pleasant, West Virginia in the mid-1960s. 7 foot tall, a wingspan of 10 feet, and glowing red eyes, flying fast at 100 miles an hour. Of course, I am talking about the Mothman, one of the world's most famous urban legends. The story surrounding this mythical entity seems to fall on what you believe the creature's ultimate goals were. According to some, the collapse of the Silver Bridge was foretold by the appearance of the Mothman, and it is either drawn to these disasters for its own pleasure or to warn mankind of the impending danger. This is not the only case of such warnings being attributed to the Mothman. In 1999, reported sightings of the Mothman occurred shortly before the Russian apartment bombings. The same in New York in 2001. And, of course, the one that we're interested in. The sightings in Chernobyl that occurred in the weeks leading up to the April 26, 1986 disaster at Unit 4. This is the story of the Black Bird of Chernobyl, and the real truth behind it. The story of the Black Bird of Chernobyl reads like a horror movie, with details buried under more details, almost like an onion. So, let's peel back the layers and see what tales lie underneath. Now, the first layer begins with what we can expect from a Mothman sighting. The sightings themselves, and how unusual they are. The most prominent of these stories seems to be that 5 employees of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant encountered the Black Bird of Chernobyl one night, an all-black entity with no head and red eyes on the torso. With these sightings on the rise, the workers went to their supervisors, which would have been the likes of Dyatlov, Sitnikov, Lyutov, Rogozhin, and others. Now, this was never taken seriously by any of these men, given all the evidence we have today. However, someone definitely noticed, as these workers then claimed that they began receiving phone calls at night, that when they picked up, nobody would be on the other end of. But the nights would not end with these phone calls. In their dreams, the same black-bodied entity and its piercing red eyes would appear endlessly, continuing relentlessly for weeks. And then came the threats. Actual, aggressive phone calls to those who witnessed the entity. KGB officers threatened those individuals who reported sightings, and tensions grew. And then came April 26, 1986. Firefighters and other first responders have been deployed to the site, battling the blaze from the ground and the roof. And what did they see? The Black Bird, flying through the smoke in the night sky, before disappearing into the black. Sightings continued after the explosion too. Claims have been made that the Blackbird entity returned even after the explosion, to chase helicopters that were flying sorties over Chernobyl. If the bird was a forewarning of disaster, then it would likely be a connection to the tragic helicopter crash of October 1986. And, as a final twist in this tale, the people who claim to have seen this entity have all since died, due to unknown causes, be it radiation or something else. I will summarise here with a bit from the man who brought this legend to prominence again. Following the success of the HBO miniseries, Robert Maxwell, an Australian archaeologist who visited the Chernobyl exclusion zone in 2010 and 2012, gave his opinions on the legend. Now, it's become one of those fables that's difficult to track because it relies on the accounts of people who died due to radioactive contamination. The Blackbird has also become one of those fairly safe legends where, if you try to look for proof, it might not be available because the workers are dead, Or maybe the sightings were never officially recorded. So, for people trying to check the veracity of these claims, of course, you've got to take them on face value because there's not a lot of history or archaeology to go on. But the stories persist, even to this day. Now for this part of the video, the debunking. I, of course, would first like to thank Darman Richer, author of the book Chernobyl, A Stalker's Guide, and the owner of the Ex-Utopia website. Without his research, I would not have a 100% definitive debunk, only 99%. But seriously, thank you for sharing your expertise here. Let's get over the biggest hurdle first. No one living who witnessed these events ever claimed to have seen it, and those who died but publicly gave their stories have not mentioned this story either. In fact, in many years of researching this topic, I've never found a historical reference to the Black Bird of Chernobyl. And now, to fully debunk this story, we would need to find its genesis, and, as it happens, Darman Richer has found it. The movie The Mothman Prophecies actually makes the claim that Mothman is a rough translation of the Ukrainian term for an entity seen 100 times in Chernobyl before the accident. And the events seen in this film and the legend match up well. Dreams haunted by the appearance of the Mothman, cold phone calls, ignored warnings. The Mothman Prophecies makes the claim it is based on true events. But how much of it is true? Well, as a matter of fact, we can ask the man who did the research behind this movie, Loren Coleman. In an article he wrote for the 25th anniversary of the Chernobyl disaster, Coleman wrote the following. The movie also tries to link Chernobyl's nuclear meltdown with precursor sightings of the Mothman. Not true. There were no sightings. It was all made up for the movie. The Galveston hurricane claim is also fake, according to Coleman. So that's about it. The rumour was born here. The first reference I have found of the Black Bird of Chernobyl is 2002, from a Russian source that also speaks about the 1999 Russian apartment bombings and the same year that the Mothman Prophecies was released. As a break, my opinion on the Mothman here is generally regarded by most scientists who believe the events in West Virginia happened. A sandhill crane or other large bird, which had become lost during migration and likely ended up taking shelter. It could have even accidentally rolled in some of the munition powder still left in the plant, hence the black appearance. Much in the same way UK wildlife hospitals have received believed to be exotic birds that have wound up in towns, only to be seagulls that fell into containers with curry sauce, that dyed their feathers. This has happened twice, by the way. The reason I raise this is that it is very easy to want a fantasy explanation for these occurrences, like the collapse of a bridge, a natural disaster, or, in our historical case, the explosion at a nuclear power plant. We want these stories to have some larger-than-life explanation. We all want life to be bigger than it is. 8 billion people reside on this planet, and we may never know if there is meaning of life, or what it is if there is one. And so we fill in the blanks in the world with larger-than-life stories and events. Making a bridge collapse into a story involving a giant monster bird, or Chernobyl into a story of peer-pressured workers and people running from bouncing reactor caps is what makes life interesting in the mundanity of everything else. It's the same reason we all tell fictional stories. Chernobyl is a highly complex subject, with thousands of stories, but represents a small part of a collective history of nuclear power. I hope you all continue to enjoy my content as I keep making it.